Hey y'all, welcome back to the Power and Lifting Podcast. I'm your host, Solana Lewis. Today's episode, y'all, I talked to Sioux-z Gary, who is co-owner of SSPT Powerlifting Coaching with Matt Gary. And these two are legendary for game day handling coaching. Sioux-z has been in the sport for 30 years, guys, and the talks we had, I mean, it was kind of like we started out with basically like a history lesson because I didn't know about some juicy stuff that happened back in the early 1990s with USAPL and IPF. I had no idea. So lots of good stuff that we got to talk about. You get to learn a lot of stuff about when powerlifting was evolving, but it was still predominantly just equipped powerlifting, and just learning about some of the things that her and Matt do to prepare for game day handling coaching was surreal. I mean, they are doing stuff that I think is next level, things that I would not have even thought of to do myself as a coach, to be honest. So you're going to learn a lot from this episode. You're going to love it. And if you're a coach, you might want to take some notes because it could definitely help you become an even better coach. So let's stop talking about what you're going to learn and dive into today's episode. Okay, y'all, I am thrilled out of my mind because I have Susan. Do you prefer Sue or Suzanne? Or Susie? Susie? Okay. Sioux-z Hartwig Gary is with me, and you're a legend. Like, I'm so stoked. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today, Solana?
I'm doing pretty good. Like, Matt hit me up the other week just mentioning he listens to the podcast, and I was like, oh my gosh, you listen to the podcast.
Yeah, now every time I go for a walk, I listen to one of your old ones.
Oh, it makes you so happy. And you can binge it because I now have a good amount, so you can just like go through it.
Exactly. Yeah, Matt and I have been a little remiss. We haven't done a podcast in a long time, so we have to start hitting some up again too.
There we go. Awesome. So before we dive into talking all about you and who Susie really is, Susie, do you believe that's important to wear quality shoes when you deadlift?
100%.
I also agree, y'all. That is why I am thankful for today's sponsor for the podcast. We have Sabo deadlift shoes. I've been wearing Sabo deadlift shoes for over 2 years now on the platform, off the platform, and training. They're sturdy, great quality. They do not wear and tear, literally the same pair 2 years, and they're still going strong. And honestly, if you're not wearing quality shoes, you may be giving up some kilos. Those feet are slipping around. And if you have a wider stance deadlift like I do for sumo, you don't want those feet spilling off to the sides. So y'all use promo code Solana or the link in the show notes. Grab yourself a pair at a discounted price. And let's do it. Okay. So excellent. I was looking at your open powerlifting and I'm like, oh my God, you've been competing since before I was alive. Like, it's been that long.
Yeah.
29 years.
Actually, it's been 32 now.
32. I saw your first meet was 1993.
Well, that was my first nationals. I started lifting in 91.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So do you like what was going on? So back then, right? I know it basically all equipped, right? Like there was like really no raw powerlifting happening.
Right. I mean, my first two meets were raw because I didn't have equipment, but they were still considered equipped.
Okay. So you're doing equipped meet, but just like raw, basically.
Yep.
So how did you find the sport in 1991?
Well, the crazy thing is the summer of 1990, I had actually worked at Mount Rushmore, and everyone that worked there lived in a dormitory, and there was a small universal a piece of equipment in the basement, you know, where you could do a little bit of legs and lat pull downs and stuff like that. So some guys were working out. I asked if I could join them. And after a day of training with them, the guy's like, you're strong. You should be a power lifter. I was like, cool, what's that? And then it took me until January, my last semester of college, to actually find the intramural club at my school. So I got a hold of the guy that I'd worked with during the summer, and I trained for 6 weeks. and did my first competition. And 2 weeks later, I did my second competition. And a week later, I did my third competition.
Wow.
Because in South Dakota, I did 2 organizations, and we had one at our college and the other 2 were state championships. And I was so bit by the bug that graduating with math and a minor in computers, I decided I was going to move to the East Coast where there were powerlifters and be a nanny and lift weights.
So it really bit you. Like you were like, and I'm stopping everything I'm doing, just going to go compete.
Yeah, literally, I trained 6 weeks. I competed over 4 weeks, and I was like, wow. I'm like, my total is only 90 pounds under the girl who won ADFPA nationals, and I don't even know what I'm doing yet. So it was like, I could be good at this. I think I finally found my sport. So I was excited. I thought I'd do it for about 2 or 3 years, have a little fun, and still doing it and still having fun.
But say take 3 years, multiplied by 10, and that's where we are.
Exactly.
Oh, that's incredible. She was like got up and moved over. So when you moved to South Dakota, did you know anyone besides like some people in the gym? Or was it just like full on like new place, let's do it?
When I moved from South Dakota to Virginia, the only people I knew were the people that I nannied for. I literally took a Greyhound bus, interviewed with families, picked one, moved in, and they were the only people I knew.
Incredible. So you must have like the personality of just like where the wind takes me, I'm going.
Well, no, but I can be happy anywhere I am. And I just really felt like, wow, I could be good at this and I'm going to regret if I don't try. So I was like, it can be kind of scary, but I can get along with anyone. And I'm like, I'll at least know the people I live with. So the first, I'd say 3-4 months were really tough because I was training in like a fancy athletic club that the family belonged to. So most of the people there were like doctors, lawyers, or in the government, and they didn't have time for anybody. So it was funny because I'd look around and I'd be like, okay, who would be strong enough to spot me or lift off to me, and I wasn't that strong then. And it was so funny because back then, and this was in the 90s and before your time, I don't know if you watch football, but the Redskins had won the championship like a couple years before I moved there. And I didn't know the Redskins, a lot of them trained there. So I'd actually walked up to one of the football players and was like, hey, can you spot me in the squat? And later someone's like, do you know who that was? And I'm like, it looked like a guy big enough to spot me. And they're like, well, that's a football player.
That's incredible.
Yeah. But then I finally found in like 1994, I found other power lifters. And that was such a big difference. I joined a powerlifting gym,
Yes. I mean, I'm sure it has to be because were you training raw in this gym before you switched to the powerlifting gym?
No, I actually then was training equipped, but I was wrapping my own knees and I'd put on my suits myself, and the bench shirt, I would just kind of talk people through how to put it on me. But I didn't, about to say. Yeah, I didn't wear it real tight because it's like, I wasn't sure anyone would be able to help me. So it was really tough the first couple years. But then when I found, a group of power lifters, it was awesome.
Okay. So I know that the first few years you mentioned you were in a different federation. Hold on, I have it right here. So you started out in the ADFPA, which you just said, and then you started doing USAPL in 1998, which got you to IPF Worlds. So when did you switch? Like, what made you switch federations? Was it just like learning about how USAPL works and how you can get a route to Worlds?
So I did ADFPA and what was USPF. And USPF used to be the gateway to the IPF. So I did ADFPA the first couple of years because I kind of looked at the numbers of what were people doing. I didn't realize, okay, this is tested, this is untested. At the time, I simply went, okay, I'm a beginner. This looks like the semi-pros. This looks like the pros. So I started in ADFPA for a couple of years, but then I wanted to be able to go to the IPF. So I switched to the USPF and I did local meets. I did both. but I started competing nationally in 95 in the USPF. And if it wouldn't have been for an injury, I was actually skiing and someone knocked me off the side of the cliff and I tore my adductor.
Ooh.
So then I went to nationals and I bombed because I just didn't get deep enough. I went from legs out here to like this, with my adductor. And then I finally won USPF nationals in 1997, was told you get to go to IPF Worlds. And then the USPF got kicked out of the IPF in November of that year. And I got a call saying, if you want to go to Worlds, you need to go to the USAPL nationals and to qualify to go to Worlds. And a lot of people don't know, but it was going to be the USPF and the ADFPA were going to combine together and become the USAPL. So the two organizations were actually going to join, but IPF was sick and tired of some of the stuff that the USPF brass were doing, and they just kicked them out outright. So the ADFPA more or less just changed their name and they became the USAPL. But a lot of the USPF lifters that, weren't afraid of being drug tested and wanted to keep going to the IPF switched over and joined the people that had been the ADFPA. So that's why I changed. I wanted to compete internationally on the best stage. And I had competed at the world championships that the ADFPA belonged to before, but there were like 9 countries that would show up. So it was fun, but I wanted to compete against the best of the best. And at the time, that's where the strongest people were. And again, I was still a little naive until people started telling me that a lot of the people and a lot of the countries actually, were doping, but not everybody. A lot of people weren't, but some of them were very organized. We actually in 2005 or 6, they showed up unannounced to the Russian and the Ukrainian nationals and tested. I think it was they tested 19 people total, 18 failed.
Wow.
Yeah. They were kicked out for a year and then let back into the IPF. And that's when the IPF finally started doing like out of competition testing and stuff. But they still, they don't do any sort of testing like the USAPL does. I really like the USAPL. You're not going to catch everyone, but the fact that they do a lot of testing, it just makes for a more playing field for people.
So wait, so for anyone listening, tell me this doesn't sound like deja vu of what just happened last year. I'm like, this happened already? Like, I've only been in this sport for 7 years, so I didn't know any of this. I had never heard of ADFPA, actually, until I saw the letters when I was looking up everything you were doing or you've done.
Well, and people that are new didn't realize the USAPL started out because more or less the ADFPA just became the USAPL. Because the USAPL was like a few years back, they had t-shirts 30 years strong, but USAPL didn't actually come to existence until the end of 97 and they started in 98. But ADFPA was happening for a long time before then. That's why I've had a few people say to me, how is the USAPL over 30 years old? And, so I explained, well, they just kind of changed their name, but it's the same group, the same founders. Yeah.
Got it. Whoa. Okay. So what happened to us last year happened to you. So now it's happened to you twice. But
yeah.
So then you went to IPF in Norway, and I looked, and you've been to, a lot of world championships. I actually think I lost count trying to count all of them. So do you know how many you've been to? Like 25. To compete specifically?
To compete, 25.
And then how many have you been to in general? Because you handle, so.
Most of the time I was competing and coaching at the same world championships. I've only been to, I think, two that I didn't compete in. Just because it's so expensive traveling and stuff. And I was in the beginning, I wasn't coaching, like there weren't really coaches that you hired and did things like that. It was like a smaller group of all the equipped lifters, and everybody kind of helped each other. And then you just had head coaches of the team. And then whoever your training partners were kind of your coaches.
Mm-hmm.
At meets, you coached each other. So I did that, and I've been to 2 world games. I almost went to a third one, but that year I bombed. I didn't think I was qualified. And then they called me and they said, we decided you're qualified from what you did the year before. And world games happen every 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
They're like the Olympics for the sports that aren't quite in the Olympics, but they were going to happen 2 weeks before our wedding. So I figured maybe I probably shouldn't like fly away and to Germany and compete. So, but yeah, that was an amazing experience too.
Okay. So you just have, oh my God. So when did like powerlifting coaching kind of start to really become a thing, right? Because like for me, right, like I'm 26, it's 2022, and like this is my full-time job, which I'm sure when you first started, you couldn't even imagine a human being being like a full-time coach. Like this, the idea of that, because like coaching wasn't really a thing. So like when did coaching start to become like something that most people who were serious about the sport started to invest in?
Right, because there were always personal trainers,
Mm-hmm.
but coaches, as far as powerlifting coaches, honestly, I don't think it's actually been, it hasn't even been 10 years where people actually sought out, like the best of the best sometimes sought out people before then. It kind of started the first year that the USAPL was at the Arnold Sports Festival. They used to have different areas of the country, and they made teams, and they asked my husband Matt to be the head of one of the teams. And then so he and I coached a team of, I think it was like 7 people, and then they took the best 5 people scores to see who was the winner of the team competition at the Arnold Sports Festival. And it was really awesome and really fun. And that was the first time we worked with people we otherwise wouldn't have, because Matt and I coached pretty much at female championships, because the men's and women's world championships and nationals used to be separate. So that was before you, and we tried to get them together. And then the first world championships that was together was in 2006. So before then, when I would compete, it was only women. So Matt was always just coaching. He was an assistant coach on the team for a lot of years, and then the head coach of only the female team, because who could afford? I was spending $5,000 taking myself and my coach, and it would have been 10 just to go watch the guys, So
Mm-hmm.
it was just that. But I think then when it was kind of like, oh, because we were coaching people that we had never worked with before, and people started kind of dabbling with, maybe I need a coach. But I think when we started SSPT and we started training people in the gym and then taking them to competitions, that's when it kind of started for us. And we opened in 2009, but like 2010 and 11, some people were hiring coaches, like people were hiring Matt and I. But I honestly think most people weren't hiring a powerlifting coach probably until like 2015 or something. And I could be wrong, but that's when it became more prevalent. A lot of people maybe had a coach just at the meet, but still, we were some of the only people that were like coaching people and then started to coach people that weren't even our clients. I mean, we're so blessed. We have a lot of people, we'll go to a national championship and we're coaching coaches.
Yeah.
Like Sam Calhoun, right? She's a coach. She's an awesome coach. And when she competes, she has us coach her. And Bryce Lewis, he's a coach. And I'm just going to turn my phone on totally off.
Go ahead.
Because it beeped. Mike Tashir, who has RTS, we've coached him. So a lot of different people. Ray Williams is not a powerlifting coach, but he's a football coach.
Yep.
So it's an honor and a privilege for us, but also to have people that are coaches have us coach them, because it speaks highly if a coach wants to hire you. And I actually went to a competition, and Matt wasn't going to be there, and I had 4 people lined up that I was coaching one day, And I had 2 people reach out to me the day before. Is there any way, you can help me? And I'm like, well, I don't know if I can be a full coach to 6 people and be fair, but I can set you up, tell you your attempts and run back and forth and stuff. But that's a long answer to your thing. But I honestly think it wasn't very prevalent till at least 2015.
And that makes so much sense because that's the year I started. Because I'm thinking I've always seen this. And I'm like, well, that's when I got started. And for people who don't know, like Matt Gary and Sioux-z Gary are like legends for game day handling. Like, and just like you said, like you coach the best of the best. Like whenever I see like the best, I'm like, oh, let me guess. They they invested in SSPT, didn't they, for their game day handling? And that's another big thing I wanted to talk to you about. Before I really dive into it, when did you meet Matt? Were y'all like together when you started powerlifting? Like, when did that happen? Because this is such a beautiful, perfect match for like your whole career.
So Matt saw me at a competition in 1994. He started lifting 92 or 93, somewhere around there. I started obviously in South Dakota in 1991. But in Maryland, there was one main gym where people went to if they were bodybuilders or powerlifters. It was called Maryland Athletic Club. And back then, especially with the equip lifting, there might be 100 people total at the state championships. And that was every powerlifter there was, right? Competing at the same time. And so it was a smaller knit group. And so you got to know each other really well. And we trained at the same gym, but we actually trained at different times, but we'd see each other at the competitions. And there was a group of probably like 20 of us that got along. And one of our friends had a pool and we'd have pool parties and hang out and stuff. But he and I were dating other people. So we knew each other for probably 7 years, maybe even it was 8 or 9 before we ever dated. And we actually had started hanging out and became best friends before we started dating.
Oh,
yeah.
That's awesome. What year did you say you got married again? I know you mentioned it.
We got married in 2005.
Nice. Okay. And then by the time, like, when did like you guys combine like the coaching together, like working together to handle people?
I would say that was 2008.
Okay.
When he was appointed at the Arnold Sports Festival to coach. And then also he was the coach of the men's team and I helped him out at the World Games in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm sorry, not Japan, Taiwan. And he was the head coach for the women's equipped team. So once we started doing in 2008, he was a head coach for the NAPF. And for people that don't know, that's like a regional championships. So once he became a head coach, we started really coaching together a lot. And then we opened our gym SSPT in 2009. And after that, it was just kind of the tag team working together. And it was awesome because we both are very analytical when it comes to certain things. But yet we're very different as far as dealing with people. If there's someone that's super high maintenance, I'm really good at that and stuff, and I work with Ray Williams. I've coached him by myself before, but Matt being able to spot and load, it's like we both do everything, but then there's certain times where one of us it's great to have a team instead of there just be one of us.
Yes. And this is perfect leading to my next question because it's like we just mentioned, you train or no, you handle some of the best in the world. And what goes in to handling an elite level lifter? Like, so for example, Ray Williams going to Worlds, like what goes into handling him before you even get to the meets? Because there's stuff happening before you get to the meets. And most people are probably like, don't you just show up and like, you have some numbers written down? No.
Well, a lot of coaches do that. And I'll be honest. So there's a little bit of difference when you're working with a Ray Williams, a Taylor Atwood, a Sam Calhoun, and Dennis Cornelius, all of those. There are differences. Then I also love working with someone that's their first meet ever. And in most cases, everything is treated the same. But when you have someone who's highly competitive and they're going to a world championships, any coach can go on social media and look at the other lifters' lifts and stuff like that. But how many times do you actually see coaches that have a sheet of paper and have things written down? So pre-game, we'll do a video consult or a call with our lifters. We review their videos. We look into their competition. We look at what their PRs are, how often they make and miss attempts. I could tell you more, but it's kind of a trade secret. No, I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. I'm totally kidding. So, so a lot goes into it. It's not just game day. I don't know how many hours Matt and I spend combing through both our lifter and their competitors.
Mm-hmm.
And then actually, it's been about 2 years ago, Matt joined up with Jason Tremblay. He is part of the strength guys. He's like the main guy.
Mm-hmm.
And they have put together scouting reports that you can actually buy from them for big competitions like a world championships and things like that. So, and it's well worth the money, and they can get it from our website or from TSA's website. But it's really cool because between both of their mental and coaching abilities, and then Jason's done different programming and stuff, they have things where they will research the PRs in every discipline of their lifter, all the other lifters. When did they hit their PRs? What did they weigh when they weighed it? Because, some people change body weights and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What are their attempt selections like? Because it's good to know if your competition goes 5 and 5 or they go 20 and 20. And because people will sometimes freak out, or, most of the people we lift with, our coach with on the high level, they're not freaking out because of where someone's opening up. But it's nice to know, well, yeah, they're opening higher than you, but you're going to jump 10-10 and they're going to jump 5-2.
Mm-hmm.
So things like that make a big difference. We look into the percentage of successful attempts. Like when someone competes, if they might go 8 and 9 for 9 at a local meet, but they may tend to go 5 or 6 for 9 at a big meet, either because of travel or nerves or hard weight cuts. So all of the research, like that, this collaboration that Jason and Matt have done together, it puts all of that on a piece of paper, and it has a printout of all the people that you're competing with, and reliability as far as, do they hit their PRs, like I was saying, in a big meet, in a little meet, things like that. So it's really cool. And like, for example, when they were going into Raw Nationals, they had done enough research. They knew one of the competitors had actually tore their hand right in the last week or two of prep. And so they're like, okay, this might affect their deadlifts. So, and it's like, that's not a game changer, but it's nice when the person who's coaching you has done enough research that they all know those little things that might happen.
So this is the definition of next level.
Yeah, a lot of stuff goes into it. And Matt and I did a lot of these things ahead of time, and people used to laugh because he'd carry a clipboard and I've got 6 pieces of paper in my pocket, and we pull it out and it's like, these are the planned attempts. This is if it doesn't go great. And we've got the numbers of their competitors written down, and we have the goals. So that's another thing too, not talking about the competitors, but when we meet on the phone, or lots of times it's a Zoom because it's great, face to face when you're working with people. What is your number one goal, right? If it's a new person, I tell them your number one goal should be to have fun and lift well. Go 8 or 9 for 9, make attempts, make it so you want to come back. Mm-hmm. Have fun. It's not so important if you win, but if they're competitive like me, you want to do the best you can. But it's important that you don't go out there and just go, well, I want to bench 200 pounds. I might only be strong enough for 190, but I want to bench 200, right? And how many times do you see people go to local meets and they get 3 or 4 attempts, or they don't even get that many? And it's because they want to do a certain number, but they weren't going to depth, or they weren't pausing in the gym and things like that. So we even go through all of that because we watch the videos. We critique things and say, this wouldn't be a good lift, that would be a good lift. And there's so much more than goes into it than just showing up. And it's kind of like there's a game day coach and there's a buddy to load the weights for you. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but there's a big difference, because you can have a buddy who shows up, has your plan, and puts on the bar what you say and loads the weight. But then you can have someone who also, well, the one thing that's hard to learn, you can learn it some, but I think Matt and I were kind of blessed with the capability of watching a lifter and seeing their weakest point, where they slow down or where they, and saying, yeah, he's got 5 left, not 7.5. We wanted 7, but he's got 5. And, when you're coaching someone, they're paying you to coach them, and they're like, no, I think I have this. And it's someone like Dennis, Ray, Bryce, Sam. They know themselves, and they might even know what went wrong, and that's why they can do more. And it's like, if you're 10 kilos apart, then you got to talk them down. But if you're 2.5 kilos apart, they know their body well. But sometimes, and I know myself, I'll know what I think, but I'm not sure. And I'll even say to Matt when he's coaching me, you saw it, you've seen my lifts. If you think we should go 7 instead of 10, then that's what we should do. And so trusting your coach is key also.
I was going to ask you this question later on too, but you just said it. I was going to ask you, when it comes to actually putting the attempt on the board for the next attempt, and you have that 6 seconds with your lifter, if it's an elite lifter, do you tend to listen to them a lot more and maybe like give them more the choice versus a beginner lifter? But I think you just kind of told me.
I kind of told you. The thing is, if elite level lifters aren't necessarily, there are people that are ridiculously strong that don't necessarily take good attempts. If it's an elite level lifter, and I look in the past that they missed their third attempt 75% of the time, I'm going to talk with them beforehand and say, hey, this is the theme I'm seeing. Hopefully you'll just trust me, and we can, and you kind of get them into the thought of, okay, if they think heavier and we think 2.5 less, to do 2.5 less. And because, we don't have problems with Sam and stuff. There was a time when Matt, I was the head coach, Matt was assisting me, and we were coaching Taylor Atwood at the World Championships in Killeen, Texas in 2016. And Taylor came off and he's like, I've got this much. And Matt said, I think he has this much. I said, I think he has this much. I thought he had 2.5 more. And so did Taylor. And I said to Matt, I said, you're right, as far as that's probably what he should take, but he really wants it. And I believe he's going to get it, but it's going to be a grind, because I've seen him grind this before. And so we actually went with the bigger number, and he got it, and it, and he had to really work for it. But there's been times it's like, look, if in the end of the day, when someone's paying you, if they're like, this is really what I want, you put it on the bar. But if you think you're wrong, you try to convince them otherwise. But those are conversations. If they typically make a lot of third attempts and they tell me a certain number, then okay. And if it's a new person that's done the same thing, they may say, hey, I know it looked bad, but this was different. I can do this. Then I'm probably gonna trust them if their track record is making a lot of attempts. Whether they're a seasoned lifter, I'm sure you've seen people that have been lifting 20 years and you think, oh my gosh, they still kind of look like a train wreck, right? Mm-hmm. But they're strong as can be, so it works for them. But I would rather go 9 for 9 and I left a little bit on the bar, not purposefully, but oh, okay, you could have pushed it and maybe got 2.5 more, than to go 4 for 9 shooting for the fences.
Yes. And that's something I definitely have learned, because my coach is Brad Couliard, and also I'm friends with Sam, and that's definitely something they really teach. Like, yes, you don't want to make attempts. Like, the goal is to make attempts, not to just shoot for the moon and hope to God on every third attempt you make it, but you're really like wishing and hoping, and that's the only thing that's gonna get there is the hope. It's like, yeah, I think in general, a big theme that I've seen with you and Matt is like the people you handle, like they hit majority of their attempts. And actually, I'm wondering, because you guys are big with numbers, do you like have a percentage of like the amount of people you coach and handle that hit attempts, like period, over all time?
We often will do it like at each championship and
Okay.
such. So I think, and I won't call any names out. I think we had one person that went 6 for 9 at nationals, but I believe our average was like 8.1 out of 9 attempts made out of the 15 people we worked with.
Incredible. Oh my
So that's
gosh.
good. That's great. And I was one of the bad ones that missed one. I was only an 8, so I brought down that number. But we had enough 9s to kind of make up for it. But in typically, sometimes things happen. People miss lifts. And sometimes we are working with new people and they're younger and they're getting super strong really fast, and you see their videos in training, and then you find out they weren't honest, that they were actually 6 pounds overweight doing it. So it really affected their weight cut. Or sadly, many times the best way for people to learn, whether they're new and they're novice or they've been doing it for a really long time, is through failure.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say failure, I don't mean that you wanted to win a national championships and you didn't, because I don't consider that a failure. If you went in and you pushed yourself and you lifted well, that's a success. It might be a disappointment, right? You didn't get what you wanted, but that's not a failure. Failure is going into a meet and saying, I'm not trying unless I try for a PR every time on my second and third attempts, right? And they do it and they continually aren't making many lifts. And they may get a PR because they've always tried PRs on their second attempt, and every now and then you're going to get one. But most people after a while get tired of that many misses, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's how they learn. Because how many times have they had people, well, but I wanted to squat 300. And as a coach, you're trying to say, I know you want to squat 300, but today you've only got 290. So we can
Mm-hmm.
put 300 on the bar, but I'm going to be honest, I don't think it's going to come up. 290 is going to come up and we can build your total. And sometimes people have to fail a few times before they can learn a lesson, because you can tell them, but it doesn't necessarily mean it'll sink in. And it's hard because also new people, they'll have progress. And then suddenly it'll start to slow down and they still think they should get 5 and 10 pound PRs at every meet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that easy. It doesn't happen. Like I tell people, for me to get a PR total, I have to go 9 for 9 because I've been doing it so long there, and it's hard to get a PR in anything, let alone a PR total. But there's always a chance when you string things together. And then for those people that are getting older, like myself, I felt great until about 50, and then with COVID and training being different and stuff, I had a few tweaks that happened that I'd tried different things and I irritated myself. And it's like, so now you also have to be humble and step back a little bit and see, where am I at right now? As opposed to a lot of people, but I did this 2 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
right? So right now I'm looking, can I PR better than what I've done in the past 2 years? Because I know since I've had different injuries and such, it's crazy to think in 2018, I guest lifted at the Canadian Nationals and I tore my hamstring. So on my last lift. So it seemed really bad. Matt had to come out and pick me up. I couldn't stand up on my own, but then I walked around, had PT work with me and stuff. I did a lot of singles in the squat and deadlift leading up to the World Championships, like 3 months later. And my PR at the time was 156.5 in the squat. And I thought at Canadian Nationals, I'd be hitting like 160. But I'm like, okay, I'm coming back from an injury. I haven't been able to train like I normally do. Um, I'm going to just shoot for 152.5 and I'll be happy if I can get that. And I did. And I got a PR bench by half a kilo. And I got a world record because I was in a new age class, but I only did like 5 kilos under my PR in the deadlift kind of thing. So for me, I got all 9 lifts. I lifted to my ability that day. I was super excited, not because I won, but because I performed well coming back from an injury. And then now, if I could take 152.5, I'd be so happy. But I'm looking at probably when I go to the Virginia Pro, I don't know. Maybe I'll be at 145, maybe I'll be at 150. Things are starting to go uphill again, which is awesome. I think I've gotten past all the different little things going on, but you have to take into consideration life. I travel every month for work. I've been going back and forth seeing my family and different things like that. Are you sleeping? I'm not eating as well as I used to. So I kind of like checked myself and was like, all right, Susie, time to focus on you and your training for a little while. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I say all of this because it's like people have to realize there's ups and downs. And one of the things I think that a benefit that I have as a coach is I can talk to my lifters when they're injured. And you know how many times people like push themselves way too hard, way too fast to come back from an injury. And you give them advice and they're just kind of like, yeah, whatever. But I can say, hey, I had a bulging disc in my neck. I went from pressing 175 for 5 to I could barely press the bar and will it off my chest. And I took 2 months of absolutely no lifting, just rehab stuff. And then I came back very slowly. And that was in 2004. And
Mm.
now I'm still competing. Right. And I hit PRs in everything since then. Now, some things, my deadlift was hampered. I couldn't do some certain training. My bench hasn't been as strong as it had been because of other things. But when Raw came out, it was like a way to clean the slate and start having, new PRs and everything. But when you can relate your story of I went through this and I took the time and I came back and I'm still competing, or not to throw my husband under the bus, but he tore a quad, thought he was feeling better and had pushed himself and he pulled an adductor because he was compensating and and things like that. And then he learned and now he takes his time to he had a really bad injury back in 2015 and people didn't think he'd be able to squat to depth again. And he deadlifted a PR like 6 months after the fact. So, but he took his time.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing that, if I could give advice to people out there, have fun and take time. This is not a sprint. This is a marathon. You can get really strong really fast, but most of the people that get super strong, super fast also end up injured and you don't know where they are 3 or 4 years later.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that is so true. And you mentioned the word travel a few times, and you've obviously been to so many world championships and nationals, and you travel a lot for work. So, how much? It's hard to ask this question. Travel can affect your lifting, especially if you're going to Worlds in South Africa, right? And you're from Virginia, right? So, like,
Right.
how much do you put that into account when you're making someone's game day plan for like a big meet where you know they're traveling very far for like maybe even more than 10 hours?
It actually really depends on the person. So I'll talk with them and find out if they've traveled in the past. Do they sleep well? Do they acclimate well? When I do long trips, I take a whole bunch of food on the plane with me. So I'm eating my food. I drink massive quantities of water so I don't have dehydration followed by rehydration. Um, I know that I can perform well and hit PRs in South Africa as well as I can in Virginia. And I have lifters that know they're going to lift 2.5 or 5 less when they travel because they don't sleep as well in the other bed, or like my husband Matt has trouble acclimating to the time change. So, never being able to sleep well at night. So I it really depends on the person. Some people, they're going to be able to hit a PR. Other people, you have to dial it back, but it's all about talking with them, studying. And if it's their first one, you plan that you start a little lighter. And if things go well, then you can have slightly bigger jumps kind of thing. But you
Mhm.
really have to plan for the fact that it will affect them. Or on game day, you look at the warm-ups and you're like, hey, we're going to have to, you usually have an A and a B plan if they've never done it before. I really suggest that you land for two reasons. One, I've known a lot of people that their connections were canceled or whatever, so they
Mhm.
don't get in until a day after they planned anyway. But I always like to land and then have a minimum of 2 more full days after the day I land before I compete. And even just going to Europe, because it kind of helps you get used to the time change. When I went to South Africa, I would say, you know what? I'm going to land 4 days ahead of time. I went to Johannesburg and I did a little bit of sightseeing. Nothing insane, but I don't usually sit on my tush all day. So why not walk around, see, and do things and get a little bit used to everything? I
Mhm.
know people that went a week ahead of time to the World Championships this year because it was in Africa, South Africa, and they were afraid of the time change. So, I mean, if you have a job and you can afford it, a week is great. But also, it depends on the country, because what if it's a country where you're not sure what kind of food you can get?
Mhm.
So, I usually give all of my athletes a huge list of, this is what I've learned, and this is what I would do going to a world championships. Packing certain things yourself, food that isn't that heavy, but food you can eat, your own electrolytes. Don't buy things off the shelf if you can't read what's in them.
Yep.
That's a big danger thing. Take extra of this and that. Always carry your equipment on your carry-on. And if you're getting into a teeny tiny plane and they're taking your carry-on, put your belt around your waist with your shoes hanging off it, because don't let them take your stuff. So it's things like that. But I mean, that's a really long answer, but it's so different for each person. But a new person, yes, I dial it back a little, but somebody that's been there, done that, they know, hey, I have to dial it back 10 kilos, or I can hit a PR.
Yeah, that's really good to know because I think a lot of people like kind of underestimate travel or they may even overestimate it, but like unless you've done it, you kind of have to just plan to possibly pull back, but to also have a regular plan A of like if I feel great, maybe we do for what I can usually do. That's probably really smart. And I do want to ask you, do you find that like certain weight classes tend to get hit harder than others? I don't know, that's a weird question, but like super heavyweight, for example, do they tend to travel just maybe as well as a lighter weight person, or is it literally just depending on the person? I've been told super heavyweight can potentially be harder to travel, and I don't understand why, or that's completely false.
So there are a couple of reasons why it can be harder for a super heavyweight. I'm not saying I'm comfortable on an airplane flying to South Africa, but I'm little. I have to actually put something under my feet and behind my back so that I fit properly in a seat. But I can
Okay.
do that. Where Ray Williams, if he has a seat in the economy next to someone else, he's jammed up for how many hours in a super duper uncomfortable position. So a lot of big people, they can't rest at all on the plane. I don't sleep, but I rest. I watch a movie. I drink like 1 or 2 bottles of water. I go to the bathroom and then I nap for 20 to 40 minutes. Then I watch a movie, drink lots and lots of water, go to the bathroom and take a mini nap. So I feel rested even though I might be tired. And I also stretch. It was pretty funny because I was on a plane, and in between one of the aisles and like the bathrooms, there was probably a space about this big going all the way across. And I started doing this, I don't know, 20 years ago. And I'm standing in the back, I'm doing all my stretches and doing lunges and doing squats. And first people looked at me and they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I don't want to get stiff and sore. And so it was funny because people started doing things in the back with me exercising and stuff. But, you know, it's hard for the big guys to be able to really move and stretch on a plane also.
Mm-hmm.
So that part of the travel can affect them. One year, I know Ray had issues finding enough food. And, you know, you don't want to go broke and you don't want to eat stuff you're not used to. So if you're in a country like Belarus, it's not like you walk into a store and you can just say, or a restaurant, I want 4 chicken breasts and some rice, you know. So until you find a place to eat, that can be hard too. For me, I find rotisserie chickens. There's either going to be a store or a restaurant or somebody usually that has something like that. And I'll buy a couple and put it in my fridge. And that'll last me for a couple of days. But that's not going to last Ray Williams for a couple of days. Right. And beds, like a lot of these foreign countries, you get a teeny tiny twin bed. And they're not that comfortable anyway, but I'm 115 pounds on the uncomfortable mattress. They're 400 pounds. And, you know, so finding enough food, it's harder, I think, for the bigger guys to get comfortable. Now, on the flip side, where it can be hard for the lightweight people is the heavyweights aren't dieting. They're not cutting weight. So that's something they don't have to take into consideration whatsoever. They just need to make sure they eat enough, right? And typically you can eat enough, unless you're in a country where it's really hard just to find the right food.
Yeah.
But the little people are trying to cut weight. And when you, again, can't necessarily, you're not at home where you can make your own chicken breasts and things like that. So it can affect them more if they have trouble finding healthy food. Because I've been places where you can find food, but everything's like deep fat fried or greasy, it seems like. So it's kind of the per person, but I think overall it's probably easier on little people just because of the travel and the size of the beds and stuff like that.
I'm really happy you told me that, because I literally was like, I wonder like what weight classes have a harder time, easier time. And that's like inside the, like, if you actually pay enough attention and travel enough, you're like, oh, okay, I see a pattern here. Like, yeah, and that makes total sense.
But some people sleep really well, right? No matter where they're at. So you might be a heavyweight that sleeps well and a lightweight that doesn't sleep well unless you're in your own bed. I take my own pillow with me. I put a pillow in my suitcase. Yeah. So
those are probably some of the hacks that you're telling people. I might have to purchase a Sioux-z Gary like hack list for like traveling. Like,
there you go. I laughed because last World Championships we went to, my suitcase that I checked in had a case of Premier Protein, my special pillow, which is huge. And then I shoved a little bit of clothes in there. That was, I mean, and you know, that's what I packed. And a few food, banana cake and sweet potatoes, like things I didn't know if I could get, but I wanted, that I pre-made and I put in my suitcase.
So like barely any clothes, mostly food and a pill. Yeah, that's the stuff we need to know. I've never thought to bring my own pillow, and my neck always hurts when I travel.
There you go. And my pillow's huge. It's got a ramp for your neck and you can turn sideways here and there. It takes up a lot of my suitcase, but I'm like, if I can fit the protein, my pillow, my clothes are little, right? So I can just shove them in everywhere.
Nice. Okay, so I want to kind of just end off with like a few quick questions since you have been in the sport for so long. I think this will be fun. So what is the best handling experience you ever had? Like the most fun, or even if fun for you is most stressful, just the best one you look back, you're like, yo, I remember that moment and I'll never forget it.
Oh my gosh. You say a quick and easy question. I wish I'd known that question in advance, because I have coached and had so many awesome experiences. Like when somebody is fighting for their life and then they finally get that lift. But I guess I will just say the one that really pops in my mind, and it wasn't even the biggest thing, was coaching Sam Calhoun at Nationals. And it was a super tight battle. And every single attempt when we were picking the numbers, you're thinking if somebody sweat on that bar, she wouldn't have got it. And she went 9 for 9 and she won. And it was like, this is just amazing, right? So
Yes.
but I've been so blessed to have a lot of experiences like that. But I also, it's funny, I love lifting, and of course you're ecstatic when you get it. But as a coach, you want so bad to help them lift the weight. You can just set
Mhm.
them up. Yep, you can just set them up to make it the highest probability, but there's nothing else you can do. But I swear sometimes I will the bar up. It's like, because you want it so bad for them.
Yes.
So I'm sorry, that's the one that popped in my head, but I'm sure there's going to be other ones that I'm going to think of and I'll be like, oh wow, yeah, I should have said that. But
Oh, don't worry. You can always come back on the show. So it's okay.
okay.
We'll have a
All
part
right.
two. And by the way, I believe we're referring to 2019 nationals, right? That's
2019.
so cool. I got to compete in that one with her.
Yep. And actually, one that was even ironically was actually tougher because she had a teeny bit left on her deadlift because she just went for the win.
Mhm.
Um, was 2018 when she ended up getting enough to be the alternate to go on the team. And that one, she even like every ounce of strength that she had. But yeah, very cool.
I love it. Your favorite location for worlds as a lifter?
As a lifter.
Yes.
Uh I'm just going to say Japan because that one pops out because after I competed in Japan, I went to Kyoto and I went on the bullet train into Mount Fuji, and I got to see a completely different culture than I'd ever seen before in my life. Because going to Europe was really awesome, but it wasn't that different from America. And
Yeah.
then going to Japan and seeing all the pagodas and the rock gardens and stuff like that, I always thought it would be neat to go there. Um, but the best experience, as far as the competition, is I'd have to say the first year we went to Norway, we were up near the Arctic Circle. And back then, when there wasn't internet and everything, they piped in the competition to our hotel rooms and they replayed it so you could see yourself play later that night. And they were,
Amazing.
yeah, and they were awesome. I wanted to go on a tour. The limestone caves weren't open. They called the guy, and the guy's like, sure, we'll let him in. They bent over backwards and just did everything for you. So I thought they were all like that because it was my first one.
Mhm.
Um, and it wasn't.
But
But
that one that's amazing. That's so cool. All right. Final question. And this is actually not one that I planned, but I want to ask you anyways. So you've done so many worlds and now there's another split. Will you ever do another IPF meet again?
I think so, yes. If there'd be a couple determining factors. If the master world championships, because I no longer am good enough to qualify for the opens. So if the master world championships is in a really awesome place where I've wanted to compete or wanted to just visit, then I think I would do the nationals to get there.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, I've been blessed to do so many that, like, I think next year it's either, or South Africa and places I've been quite a few times. I really, really love lifting and USA powerlifting. I love the competition. I coach so many people there.
Mm-hmm.
I have nothing against all the lifters in Powerlifting America. I coached them also. I went to the master championships there and coached masters and juniors. I was actually even going to go to the world championships possibly to coach a bunch of the people. It just didn't work out. But also, the other determining factor would be when I turn 60, because I want to do another world championships at 60.
That's a good reason. Cause that's amazing. There's not enough people doing it in the 60s. So you can be someone who's like pushing people to do it and be like, I can do it every year, every decade, doesn't matter.
Well, and I said when I was only 20 something, I said, I'm probably going to take a bunch of time off in between, but I want to compete every decade till I die. And I mean, why not have it? If I'm good enough, I'd like to go to a world championships every decade.
Yeah. Oh, I freaking love it. Susie, it was so great talking to you. Y'all, there's going to have to be a part two because there's like a whole list of questions that I didn't even touch because I love talking
Sorry
to
if
you
I
about what we.
talk too much.
Oh, no, that's perfect because I'm like, my podcast hopefully will exist for a long time so I can just have you back on. But thank you
Excellent.
so much for being on today. I loved it.
Thank you for having me. And I just want to say to everybody, listen to Solana's podcast because I started binging and I love them.
Oh, thank you, Susie.
You're
All right,
welcome.
y'all. We'll catch you next time on the Power and Lifting Podcast. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Please don't forget, leave a 5-star rating and a review. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. We're also on YouTube. Subscribe to YouTube under Solana_lifts. And catch you next time on the Power and Lifting Podcast.